The core API of ASP.NET includes some components in the system.web.routing namespace, and these components know how to take an incoming HTTP request and direct it to another component designed to handle that request. Now, routing is not specific to ASP.NET MVC. That means you can use routing to direct a request to an ASP.NET web form or a WCF data service, but in MVC applications, we typically work with routing to direct requests to a controller. This is done using an API that describes a route. A route is very much like a pattern. You're essentially describing the type of URL that you expect to see and how to pick it apart. So if I see home/about, I know that the controller name is home and the action or the method to invoke on that controller is about. Likewise, account/register means please call the register action on my account controller. If some part of the URL is missing, we can provide some defaults. So if someone requests just account and no /action, then we can say, well, the default action is going to be index. And if someone just requests something from our website with right from the very root of the application, then we can also default to a controller of home. This routing configuration takes place during the startup event of your application, and you can register as many routes as you like. Inside of our project, let's open up the global.asax.cs file. Inside of here is the application start event, and inside of the start event, we invoke a method called register routes. That method is inside of the same file, and it's inside of here where you will find the code that was on the slide. It's the default routing entry for ASP.NET MVC. For many applications, it's the only entry you need, but you can place additional calls into routes.maproute in this method. We're not going to do this in this simple introduction. The first parameter is the route name. The second parameter is the one that's important. The one we have here is essentially saying take a URL like account/detail/52 and treat this as the controller name, treat this as the action name, and treat this as the ID. If any of those pieces of information are missing, for instance, if someone just requests account, then provide these values as a default. So the action name in this case would be index, and the ID would essentially be empty. With this in mind, let's do a couple experiments with a breakpoint here inside of our home controller. I'm going to run the application with debugging, and you can see that just requesting the root of the application brings me to the index action of the home controller. So actions are just public methods on controller classes. Controllers derive from this controller base class. Let me press F5 and come back into the browser and also request /home/index. That brings me to the same spot. I can also request just /home. That's also going to bring me to the index action because the default values inside of our routing entry here said if the action is missing, use a default action entry of index. But let's try something different. Let me press F5 and try to request /home/foo. Now the MVC framework essentially gives me a 404 and says the resource cannot be found. In this case, the resource was a foo action on the home controller, and there is no foo action on the home controller. But there is an about action. I can reach that, so /home/about, and that would bring us here. And of course, we have different controllers, so if I click log on, now we're going to /account/logon. This is the account controller that's in action now. What if I tried to go to /foo/index? Again, we'll get a 404 error. Now the MVC framework is looking for something called a foo controller, and it didn't find it. And so when we go back and we request /home, and we end up at the home controller, the MVC framework is literally taking this information that's coming from the routing engine that says, hey, you're looking for controller equals home. That's what I was able to glean out of the URL. The MVC framework is literally taking that and looking for something called home controller. So it automatically appends controller on to the end of that controller entry, and then goes out and looks throughout all the assemblies in my app domain looking for a class called home controller that derives from this controller base class. And that's essentially how we get started with the MVC pattern. The home controller receives an HTTP request inside of one of these action methods.